What's going on, guys? Matt Schaeffer back here with another Musaic audiophile conversion for you. This one here is a little different. It's acoustically, you wouldn't say the best car for a high-end audio system, but obviously taking that into consideration, we made it acoustically appropriate and did a badass audio system. So let's check it out. This here is a 2020 Jeep Wrangler diesel. Starting with the exterior, on this one we did both sides of the project. So we did the off-road side and we did the audio side. So starting with the body panels, it's basically a kit made by Bodyguard to bolt directly onto the Jeep. The inserts were all paint matched to match the exterior bikini color of the Jeep. It's going to be a lot to go over here, so I'll try and do it the most efficient way possible. But as far as the lighting goes, obviously we have 4 rigid lights here underneath the bar. That's going to be our fog light. We have 2 6-inch spots up top. Obviously this Jeep here is from, we're going back to Russia, but we had to make the European license plate with the adapter. So this is all made out of acrylic. And then of course we have the Alpine front camera right there in the center. So it's basically stacked in a little enclosure made in the piece of acrylic for the front license plate. So I thought that would be a good way to integrate it in. Obviously we have our Warn winch, hooks, have another spot right up here, and then we have some side spots on the side and the front. And the cool thing about how we did this one is we made it functional with the car. So these rigid lights have an ambient backlight, which is amber on the sides, which illuminate with parking lights and also turn signals. So if you hit the turn signal, that's going to illuminate and act as a turn signal, which is really cool because obviously the fenders were removed, which had the halogen bulb, and these only come with those small little lights there. So what better way to integrate that in but to wire up basically 20 relays on the whole system to get those to work with turn signals and then with parking lights. So when the parking lights are on, the parking light turns off and then they illuminate with the turn signal, which is pretty cool. Didn't do any suspension on this. He, I guess, was gonna figure it out on himself and figure out how he wanted to address the car. These wheels are just wheels we had at the shop, so it didn't look, you know, puny or silly in the video and the pictures. So that just kind of gave it the more aggressive look to fit the bumpers, but these are just loaner wheels for the time being, as you'll see in the 5th wheel in the back. We have the spots up here, and then of course we have the light bar up top. Again, backlights of these just work on a switch where they don't work with parking lights. We also have a compressor built in underneath the car, bolted up there so he can fill his tires with air if he were to go, you know, say to take it on the beach, deflate the tires. He doesn't need to pull up to an air station. He has one built in. So you got the air hookup right here, which connects to the compressor and a tank, so it does hold a little bit of air. This will give you the ability to inflate your tires or blow off the car if there's water on it, whatever it is. All right, taking a look at the Underhood. A few things we had to change here in order to get everything functional within each other. We upgraded the battery with literally the biggest power excess battery, AGM battery we can find. Comes up way higher than the factory one. Had to get very creative when it came to making these battery posts. So both of these are hand routed from aluminum, and they're labeled there, so you see negative and positive. Obviously we have a lot of different accessories now. We have a lot of power wire that is going to different places in the car, like the winch, the alternator, upgraded wire, going back to the 2-aught gauge runs to the system in the back. So a lot of new accessories had to be bolted on. So all of these 1/4-20 stainless bolts that bolt directly to are tapped threads of the new aluminum battery posts. On top of that, we have both of our circuit breakers there on a custom panel in the back. That is going to kill the power directly to both of runs going into the trunk for the amplifiers. And then of course with the alternator we did the big 3. What that really consists of is upgrading the size of the wire, the gauge wire going to the battery, to the frame, to the alternator on the power side, the ground side, and then the ground from the battery to the chassis. So all of that has now been upgraded with the ASE gauge that we have maximum current flow throughout the car. And then all of those lighting accessories that I mentioned with all those relays, we have our new fuse holder here, which is a waterproof fuse holder that is going to have literally all of our accessories, all our lighting accessories. So if one set of lights go out for whatever reason, we're going to check right here on this panel to see if there's any fuses out. So this was the best way to have that factory integrity. Everything is of course heat shrinked and connected right there to the block. And then we have all our relays in order to create all of that parking light turn signal switching that we had mentioned. So a lot of creativity and engineering had to go in here in order to get all these lights to do exactly what we want on a factory level. So another thing is we did the motorized soft top. So this is from my top. It bolts on. It's quite a little bit of work to get it adjusted properly, but there is a motorized top, so you can basically just undo your hooks here. And then of course we have the top up and down buttons, which I'll show you here pretty shortly. Going with the rear, again, these are the wheels that he'll be putting on himself. And he sent us one wheel, that way we could mock up the rear view camera. Now this part is the factory housing for the Jeep. We switched out the internal camera with the Alpine camera, and then I built this piece of acrylic to perfectly trim in where the center cap is of the wheel. So when you look at it, it is perfectly trimmed and hugging around the factory camera mount. So it looks perfectly integrated. It looks like it's, you know, certainly a part of the wheel. And of course had to make this rear license plate bracket as well to fit the size of, I guess, the Russian license plate. This here is just a mock-up of what a Russian license plate looks like, so we could brand it. And then of course you have your tag light here that illuminates with the backlights. Once again, we have these side rigid lights which will illuminate with turn signal, and then these will illuminate with turn signal and stop light. And then the main spot of that is going to be your reverse lights. So there's a switch on the Alpine to illuminate these along with the other lights, but then these will automatically illuminate with reverse lights. All right, so since we always start with the rear of the car and then work our way in, we'll do that right here. And this job really started with being a complete audio system. We took on the off-road side of it just so everything and the workmanship of everything can remain constant throughout the entire vehicle. And, you know, to be honest, a lot of the off-road stuff, the top stuff, the steel enclosure kind of goes hand in hand with making all of these pieces and accessories integrate into the vehicle to work together as like one idea. So originally we were going to do a sub back here, but we added the steel enclosure to protect all the things and valuables that you would have if the top was down. So this here can fully close, and this top lid is now locked down by the back of the door here. So there is a locked door if you fold down the seat, so you can access things from the inside. But as of right now, the only way you're getting in here is if you're opening this and then flipping this up. But we also wanted to try and acoustically make the car sound the best way possible. So obviously a lot of challenges with the Jeep Wrangler, but when I drove this here to the photo shoot and the video shoot, it sounds like you're in a modern SUV. So it does not sound like you're in a Jeep Wrangler anymore. We did a really good job of sound treating the vehicle. Inside the car, I'll overlay a picture here, but we did sound shield, sound acoustic treatment on the entire floor and all the door panels and behind a lot of the OEM plastic panels. But we did like 3 or 4 layers on the entire floor. So we stacked it literally 4 layers tall on the entire floor. So you can't really hear anything going on when you're driving this Jeep. We did a really good job, and again, it sounds like a modern SUV when you're listening to audio in here. It doesn't feel like you're in a Jeep Wrangler. It drives smooth. You're not hearing, you know, the exhaust drone, bumps, noises, anything like that. It sounds really, really good, and I couldn't be happier with how the audio side of this turned out. So I mentioned doing a subwoofer. We were going to do a 10-inch Utopia sub, but obviously back here would be a very bad idea considering that we have this steel enclosure. You'd have a ton of resonance that you'd have to deal with, and obviously you're also giving up a lot of space. So we had to kind of improvise on the fly, and you'll see our solution here shortly. But getting to the construction of the rear, if you've seen Jeep Wranglers before, you know that the floor generally starts like right here, and then it's just kind of a big carpeted floor panel, very basic, and then you have a little tub underneath for, you know, for small storage solutions. So when we did the steel enclosure, it had these metal bars that came down as supports in order to hold up this side of the enclosure. So we wanted to hide that because it looked ugly, and we wanted it to look finished. So that's what I was referring to when I was talking about us doing the enclosure along with the build out of the trunk. We built these panels really to conceal the steel supports that ran down here, and also to conceal the transition from the plastic to the carpet that you would generally see. Obviously, it doesn't look like a finished trunk at that point when you just see the normal Jeep Wrangler system, or when you see the normal Jeep Wrangler trunk. So this kind of makes it appear like it's a finished trunk. I mean, I really like how it came out. If you look at the design of this here, you have the little slots, each little section. I duplicated the same thing right here. So you have the little slits, you got grill cloth behind it so you can't see beyond it. And then you have this matte black plastic, and then you have the matching OEM vinyl here. And if you look up in the corner, you have this little Jeep Easter egg hidden there, little hidden detail. So as far as the amps go, we had to make this false floor to conceal all the amplifiers. Now, you notice this shape here, it actually conforms to the shape of the door. So now when you look in there, nothing can fall down in the back here if you had stuff rolling around, right? So obviously if the floor stopped here, you could have stuff, you know, roll and fall essentially between the door and this trunk space. But now this conforms perfectly to this, actually maximizing the floor space of the Jeep now, because before, like I said, the floor came here, and you can only store stuff up to here. And if you want to pull this completely out, you can do that. And this is what it looks like with that top completely out of the picture. So this is removable. So if you just, you know, if you had some big cargo, something that was tall, you could now do that. You can just pull out the top of the steel enclosure, has these little pull pins, and now you can see more of what we built here on the sides. But again, it's trimmed right into the edge of the steel enclosure, hides all the different bracketry that you would see holding this end of the steel enclosure up. So again, with the amps, our goal is for always everything to be as functional and serviceable as possible. So there is a little pull tab here that comes out. You can pull this up. There's a little spot for storage behind there, so you don't have to hold that up or take it out. And then we have the opening here for all our amplifiers. And again, there's a lot of improv here that had to take place. We initially designed this to be a full Mosconi Pro 110 on each speaker type of system, and then a 530 on the back and the sub, right? So the 530 would power our soundbar, mid-range and tweeter, and then we would have a 110 on each individual speaker, right? So if we had 3 ways up front, we would have a 610 on each individual speaker, so 6 amps total. Now, as we got into the system and were able to power everything up, we found out that the 110 on say a mid-range and tweeter in full range mode oscillates a certain noise when nothing's connected to the amplifier, right? So if the RCAs are unplugged from the amp, we heard a very, very, very faint noise. And again, this is more being picky than anything. We heard a very faint noise in that would not be acceptable for delivery of the car, right? So it's almost like a small white noise or a small oscillating noise when everything is at 0. And Again, you couldn't get rid of it. It wasn't like a gain issue or anything like that, or an input issue. Again, it's only if the speaker was connected to the amplifier and there was no input. So you're just listening to like the reference of the amplifier. We're able to verify that, and then a new plan we had to come up with. And that's why you see these 2 additional locations here. I can overlay a picture here of what it looked like with the full 110 setup. Looked pretty cool, but at the end of the day, we had to improvise and make that change on the fly. So we ended up going with 2 410s on our front mid-range and tweeter. So this 410 is going to be the front left mid-range and front tweeter bridge on both those channels, on those 4 channels. Same thing with here. So when you look at the system, you have your left side, you have your right side, and then you have your sound bar and then kick panel sub bass. Okay, and I'll show you that here in a second. But essentially, the reason we wanted to go with all 110s is because we wanted to eliminate as much crosstalk as possible. You know, we further did that here with the 410s, keeping the left on the left and the right on the right, where you don't have, say, a left tweeter and a right tweeter in one amplifier, where you can eliminate some of that crosstalk. That's what we tried to do. So again, you'd say, why a 110 on each speaker? We really wanted to minimize crosstalk between all of the audio equipment. So here we still have our front left mid bass, which is a 6 in the dashboard in the factory location, and again a mid and tweeter, and then sound bar, kick panel subs, and then we just utilized the spot for a Stinger 10 Farad cap. So obviously we didn't have the space to do any kind of auxiliary battery, or at the time being we didn't have any space for, you know, a cap just to stabilize the voltage. So now we just utilize that spot for a 10 Farad cap. Still fits underneath the floor just fine. Okay, and here's the other really cool thing. I talked about serviceability and functionality. This panel here on the front is totally modular and separate than that of the back. So I made it to where you can pull this up. It actually comes out and is magnetized onto the base plate. So this completely pulls out, and now you can gain access to the fuses and the wiring of the amplifiers. So heaven forbid you lost power to something, you can check here to make sure all the fuses are fine. And again, this is where all the cables are routed from underneath the car or from the back directly underneath this amp rack. So the wires and the RCAs and the speaker wire come up underneath this amp rack from this location. So you can see the magnets here that are embedded into this panel, and also this panel as well, which is your factory panel, comes off. This is magnetized on as well, falls right into these cups, and then you can now pull this off in order to get to your jack and your OEM, you know, equipment. So again, we don't like losing any type of functionality when it comes to the vehicle, which is why we you know, put in the work to come up with the design that incorporates a lot of this equipment. So this panel would then just magnetize back on. You find where it pulls, it snaps, that's ready to go. Then you have this panel, which again goes and fits and falls right back, and it flushes in. You can actually hear it click into place. And then you could take the floor, put the floor back down, roll this right back up, and that kind of hides away, and you have your trunk. So putting the steel enclosure back on, it just falls right into this area here. Push it back. You have your 2 lock pins. They just go right in the back. Click in. Steel enclosure comes down. And boom, that's how you hide all that equipment. All right, so now into the inside of the vehicle. I guess we'll start off with the Alpine Restyle. This is the restyle for the Jeep JL. As you can see, it replaces the entire radio. Still functional with a lot of the factory buttons. So you have like your volume knob here, you have like a screen off button here. That all works and is able to completely control the radio. Your factory steering wheel controls still function. like normal. So again, you don't lose any features. So this would be our accessory control unit. So again, everything is labeled right here. You have your light bar, bumper, spot, light bar. I mean, that's going to turn everything on in the vehicle, from the underglow rock lights to the light bar, bumper, all that kind of stuff. It shows you utilizing each one as it's lit up. So right now, all of those lights essentially are on out there. Turn them all off. And then as far as the interior design for our equipment, I had mentioned we use the Utopia setup here. So we have our mid-range and tweeter, and these are basically fabricated pods. So these were not there before. There was just a flat speaker plate here in the corner before, and didn't have enough room for a mid-range and tweeter. So we utilized we utilized a factory grill design. So if you look close at the grill, it's the same exact grill as you see on all the factory speakers of the Jeep. So it has like this diamond pattern with this little hole in between each cross section of the diamond. So this was all lasered out of acrylic to match that design. And again, this tweeter setup is really just to complement the interior, right? You have, you know, the silver circles all throughout the interior, which is why we did that within the mid-range. And then of course we gave a little bit of depth, so we stepped down the tweeter a bit. Both speakers are actually on the same plane with each other, so it's not like the mid-range sits higher than the tweeter. They both approximately sit at the same depth level there to keep everything pretty much on the same time alignment plane with each other. And then of course we have our dash speakers, which that was hard to tackle as well, because if you've seen or have worked on a Jeep JL, you know there's these like little 3-4 inch small drivers that are in that location there, and it's basically a small plastic enclosure that houses a tiny speaker. So we actually got the upgraded, I would say, the bigger speaker enclosures from Metra, and then we modified those to fit the Utopia. Sound treated the outside and the inside, and basically finished it off with a fast ring. And I can overlay a picture here of what the speaker looks like behind this panel. But one of the big things that we had to do that generally you're not going to do if you upgrade to a 6 is we had to open up the face of the plastic panel, because this is all one molded piece of plastic and the grill's molded to that piece of plastic, but it only has a cutout for like a 3-4 inch speaker on there. So obviously if we're going to a 6, we need more space to vent from the speaker, so you don't get a lot of back waves here behind the panel. So we actually made these, so it's an 1/8 inch piece of acrylic that bolts to the factory panel, and then we skinned it in that laser acrylic to give that design. Again, same type of grill pattern as you see on the top, same grill pattern that was on that factory grill right there, and we badged it with Focal right there. And if you can kind of see it, it's tough, but I can overlay some pictures here to see the top of the tweeter. That's where we badged the Focal emblem as well. So this was going to be our setup, and then we were going to have the sub. That's what we planned for originally, but like I said, with the steel enclosure, we weren't going to now add a sub into the back of that enclosure. So we had two options: a Footwell 10 down there, which I think would have been really killer and probably would have put this thing over the top, but at that point you'd have to justify a lot, not a lot more space, but a little bit more space down here on the passenger side footwell. So the client didn't want to give that up, so we tried to figure out the next best thing, and we took two 8-inch Focal Utopia 8-inch mid-bass drivers, and we turned them into sub-bass drivers. So essentially it's playing 125 below. I should say it's high pass at 28 hertz, and it plays all the way up to 125. So 28 to 125, and then that's when these 6s play 125 to about 350, and then 350 to about 5K, and then 5K up. So that's kind of how each speaker's handed off. So essentially we have a 4-way front, and we have two 8-inch mid-bass down here at your footwell. Now, if you look here, it's really cool because I took the same type of design that you can see on the pedal and the gas pedal, and I made a dead pedal on the front of our kick panel. So when you're getting into the car, essentially it looks like it's a factory type of setup. So you still have plenty of space for your foot. Your foot actually falls very naturally on this dead pedal. They're actually bolted to the side of the kick panel with some 1/4-20 bolts, and then they also bolt directly into the floor of the vehicle with 1/4-20. So they're super solid. Two of them here running off that 5th channel of the Mosconi Pro 530, which again worked out really well. We were able to use the mono output because again we're utilizing frequencies practically under 100 hertz, which really aren't able to be isolated with the human ear. So going mono below that threshold was completely appropriate, even though we have one to our left and to our right. So I will say, really not knowing what to expect with these kick panels, it actually kind of blew me away with what we were able to achieve out of them. And it does sound like there is a sub here in the car. Anytime that you can do any kind of sub bass up front, it's going to sound very, very natural, right? The kick drum, the attack, all that kind of stuff is going to be very prevalent in the front of the car versus the back and trying to simulate it like it's playing up front. So the kicks worked out really well. Obviously, these speakers play very efficiently over, say, 80 hertz or so, like 80 to 250, they do really well. So we had to like counter EQ the speaker, right? So we attenuated a lot of the speakers it's efficient at and increased a lot of the frequencies in which it wasn't great at in order to turn the mid bass driver into a sub bass driver in this case. But they can play, they can pump, you know, they can play pretty hard without any type of distortion. They really add a lot here. So I'm very happy because if we were to end at the 6, it would sound clear, but at the end of the day, it wouldn't be the same as if we had that lower end completion with our frequencies. And to be honest, it was kind of a happy accident as well, because at about 125, and that's why we chose that crossover point, 125, the mid bass drivers start to resonate the cross bracing of the dashboard, right? It becomes pretty prevalent. So even if we did a sub and the 6s were intended to play down to say around 80 hertz, we'd have some resonant issues that would be very hard to eliminate under 125 hertz. So again, kind of a happy accident. So the 8s carry over at that point, and no longer obviously do we have that resonance around 125, because the mid bass drivers are actually in an enclosure that are bolted to the cross bracing of the dashboard. So there'd be not a whole lot of getting around that, but in this case with the 8s, worked out perfectly. So I'd mentioned the My Top as well. You might not be able to see it because I do have a polarizer on the front of my camera, but the display for the Mosconi here actually sits behind smoked acrylic. And then we have 2 switches, which I did red illumination switches to match the Mosconi, so it'd have the same type of design. Now this whole pod was made out of stacked acrylic, and then it basically sandwiches on this top panel. So it basically clicks up on here, and again, when the system is off, you can kind of see the side there. It is just one smoked acrylic piece on the front of this. So the LCD completely gets hidden away when it's off, and then of course when it's on, you can see the front of that there. This is controlling our Mosconi 8 to 12 aerospace, which is our DSP. Just to kind of show you how the top works here, that pulls off, that pulls off, and then foot on the brake, hit the top down button, and then just like that, we have our top down. Now I'll try and show you this. It's kind of tough with that backlight there, but basically the rear speakers are almost identical to the factory speaker, much like that front dash pod. These rear speakers had a 3/4 inch cutout for the driver, which is plastic molded to the entire sound bar. So that had to be cut out. Templates had to be made out of acrylic, which I stacked. Everything bolts together. to house in our new Utopia drivers. So the two Utopia, the 6 and the tweeter, drop completely in to this location here and bolts up. And if you look at the grill pattern, again, it matches the factory almost perfectly. And then we again labeled the front of the grill here with the Footwell emblem. And now explaining the different sources we have here. Preset 1 of the Moscone is going to feature the Alpine radio. So again, anything that you're playing from the Alpine is going to play on preset 1. And within the Alpine, we have our Apple CarPlay, we have, you know, all of those modern features that you would have on a standard modern radio. So we have our SP2000 here, which works on preset 2. This is going to be the best way to get the most out of the system that's installed here. So as good as the Restyle is, it's still not going to stand up to the ASE Current. The ASE Current is made to play music, made to decode music, made to break down that digital to analog conversion there. So the ASE is going to have the benefit of creating separation within the music, right? It's going to make the stage sound deeper. It's going to make the stage sound wider than anything that you're going to listen to here. So with the Alpine, you're not going to be able to play higher quality music through here like DSD or 24192 or, you know, high-res FLAC. You're going to have limitations with this. And at the same time, to make this affordable, not everyone is running high quality music through the Restyle. A lot of people are playing compressed music from their phone, so they're not going to make even though it's an Alpine, it's not going to be made with the same components like this ASE. This ASE was made to play music at its highest quality, and it's going to have some of the best dual DACs in the world. So with that being said, playing the music through the ASE is a completely different experience than playing it through here. Now, does it still sound great through the Restyle? Yeah, of course. Does it still image great? Yes, of course. But again, it's the difference of a light switch almost, to where the stage gets twice as deep, it gets twice as wide. It just becomes a lot more of a natural listening environment through that than the Alpine. So really, we only have 2 presets. The other presets, I always just attenuate the speakers and make it like a valet mode. So if he's dropping his Jeep off somewhere, he can put on preset 4, for instance, and it's not going to play anything, right? It's going to be completely turned off. All the speakers are going to be off, and nobody could mess with or damage the equipment. Now, we also were able to do the leather seat kit here. Again, there's just so many small details in things that were done to the Jeep that were small detailed things that went hand in hand. Doing the seats, doing the inserts on the side, doing the dash pad, doing the shift boots and all that kind of stuff here, making sure everything matches and gets switched over. Now, he actually has the new steering wheel, which has the green stitching. He's going to do that himself when he gets the Jeep back. So the new WeatherTech floor mats were actually cut around the kick panel drivers there to make it, again, appear like it's built in. We use the same type of carpet that you see on the side to wrap the kick panel. Yeah, just trying to use as much attention to detail on this to make it look as factory as possible. So I do feel like when you get in here and you sit in, it doesn't really seem like anything changed, right? So if you didn't know I built these, I would hope that you would think that, hey, it's just, you know, that's the styling of the Jeep for the speaker. That's what we're going for. A lot of work to not have anything obvious makes it an extraordinary challenge. So yeah, all in all, I'm extremely happy. This was an extremely challenging project because of all the small details that had to come together to make everything integrate within each other. And on top of that, to make everything and take the time for everything to look as factory as possible, took a lot of work. And with this particular client, it was also challenging in that we did a lot of different prototypes in order to get approval from the client. So he had a pretty hands-on approach with this build and trying to figure out how everything worked together. So it just took a little bit more communication than normal. Normally I'll just figure out how to incorporate the product the best way possible, how I would do it in my own car, and that's kind of the approach we take. But in this case, again, much more hands-on, but again, it did work out because he did have some good ideas that really jived well with the direction that he wanted to go with the Jeep. So like always, guys, I really appreciate you guys for sitting through these videos. This one seemed to be a little bit longer. Obviously a lot to talk about. I tried to keep it to a minimum. I could have went on a lot longer about a lot of different things, but if you're new to the channel, make sure you subscribe. We do videos like this all the time. We do a lot of very high-end audio builds. So hit that subscribe button. Also hit that bell so you're notified anytime that we drop a new video. Also, make sure you follow our Instagram. Here's our 3 handles down below. If you have a certain project that you would like to contact me about, you have questions about a certain project, hit me up. Here's my email followed by my phone number. And also, make sure you check out our website. Our website is an awesome resource in order to see all the vehicles we've done, all the YouTube videos we've done in the corresponding album. So like the pictures that I'm overlaying right now, part of the build log, part of the pictures that I've taken. Obviously, there's a lot more to this build than you're seeing in this video. A lot of that is going to be on the Musaic website in the build log for the car. So check that out. It's labeled by make, manufacturer, all that kind of stuff. Give that a look. And then more interesting news as well. We do have a podcast that we're going to start, me and one of my friends. We're going to talk about everything, right? And it's going to be geared more towards clients on how you guys can hire the shop that you're trying to go to. So if you can't make it to me, obviously this is going to give you the information and experience in order to ask the correct questions to the shop that you're going to hire to tear apart your new car. Or if you're going to try and upgrade your car and it's a brand new, you don't want to get it mutilated, make sure that you're educated before you get that stuff done. So we're going to talk a lot about things that we're working on, things that we've, where we've come in the past, and that's going to be very exciting. It's going to be very fun and hopefully very entertaining. So if that's available out now, you'll see that link down in the description. But it is coming, it's in the works, it's going to be awesome. So with that being said, I appreciate you guys a ton, and I'll see you on the next one.